Hello, Goshen Theater Drama Club members, friends, family, fans. Welcome to episode 15 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. 15. Hey. Our show can have its quinceañera now. It's 15 episodes.
Yay!
I'm sad that none of us are in our quinceañera gear.
No.
No? Joining us today, as always, are me, Miss Amber, Managing Director of the Goshen Theater, and live from, are you in Edwardsburg, Michigan, Miss Katie, or are you still?
Oh, no, I'm in Chicago this week.
Live from Chicago, Catherine Scarlett Barnes. Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
You look great.
Thanks. I tried really hard. Rolled out of bed, put on a new shirt. Now I'm here.
And from another major city in these great United States, Paul Regano. How are you today?
I'm doing all right.
Are you maying on great United States or major city?
Major city. Nothing's going on here right now. Everyone left and nobody's coming to look at us. So, like, what do we really have going for us?
Yes.
Anyway.
In New York, there's nothing going on unless people come to look at it.
It should be our put that on the seal.
Look at me. Please.
If no one is gawking at the Empire State Building, does it even exist?
I don't know. I can't see it. You know, that's all I'm saying. Today's episode is dedicated to our top 5 favorite adaptations. We have some fun categories today. We're going to discuss our top 5 adapted Broadway musicals. There's a couple cheats on my list. There's a couple things that might be off Broadway or that I took adaptation loosely. We'll get there.
Yeah, mine definitely aren't all Broadway, y'all.
Mine are.
It's just musicals. We didn't specify Broadway. Musicals.
Oh, no, one of mine is not Broadway.
Yeah, one of mine definitely isn't. For sure. 100% not Broadway. But as you know, if you're tuning in for the first time, you don't know. We first start with either your questions or hot takes, a little topic for the panel, and then we move on to our episode content. Today, our hot take question, and I love this one, what is your favorite show from your obnoxious musical theater kid phase? Now, for those of you who don't know, and it's hard to see it when you're in it, Goshen Theater Drama Club members, but there's something called the obnoxious drama kid. And we all once were one. And maybe you are one, and that's why you've never heard of it. I don't know. Yeah. But my obnoxious theater kid phase just became a little less awkward. We were discussing before the episode. It never stopped. How about you, Paul?
Yeah, now I'm just a slightly well-adjusted theater kid. So.
Oh, you're still obnoxious.
Right, still obnoxious, but not as awkward.
Check.
As I think I've discussed on this show in the past, I started really young. So I think the first time that I realized that I was an obnoxious theater kid was kindergarten. I was obsessed with the version of the Joseph Papp production of The Pirates of Penzance.
So was I, Paul Regano.
So a little backstory. In the 80s, Joe Papp was running the public theater, established the public theater, who produces the Shakespeare in the Park series at the Delacorte. They also do a musical. And one year they did The Pirates of Penzance. Kevin Kline played the Pirate King, and George Rose and Linda Ronstadt, and it wasn't Angela Lansbury, but she played Ruth in the movie. Tony Azzito, amazing cast. Linda Ronstadt, did I say Linda Ronstadt? Anyway, they filmed it, and it was very popular, and I don't know if it was so popular that they thought this was a great idea, but they made a movie, not just filmed the production, but made a movie of an 1888, I think, Gilbert and Sullivan operetta about pirates, and it's magnificent. A lot of it is on YouTube, so look it up. Start with Cat Like Tread, or Pirate King. No? Kevin Kline singing the Pirate King? Anyway.
Pirate King. I Am the Pirate King. I would put above Cat Like Tread, though Cat Like Tread is very good.
So when I was in kindergarten, I made my best friend act out the Pirates of Penzance with me on the playground. And I realized like halfway through, I was like, oh, he does not want to be doing this. What a good friend that he will do this for me. So that was my obnoxious theater kid phase.
I love that production of Pirates. We had an HBO free trial, and they aired the movie version of Pirates of Penzance. And you know how HBO, I don't know if it is this way now, because I don't think I've watched TV on TV in years, but they would run the same stuff over and over again, kind of on a regular schedule. So I would like wait until it would come on and then like run to the TV and watch it. There are a number of really good production choices in that production of Pirates. That chase scene, there's a chase scene. They kind of treat it like a...
Oh my God, yes.
The chase scene is ridiculous. It's so good. But they sort of treat it like a staged movie. Oddly.
There are a lot of devices that they use that remind me of sort of golden age of Hollywood tropes.
Yes, there's the doily cart theater in England in the 1800s had a big picture of Queen Victoria because it was the Victorian era. And I don't know if that was required that you had a picture of Queen Victoria in your theater, but they had a giant picture of Queen Victoria on the top of their proscenium. And in this movie of Pirates of Penzance, they do the same thing. It's delightfully unpretentiously operetta. It's great.
Yeah.
Watch it. Become obsessed.
Ms. Barnes?
When I was younger, I was completely obsessed with Rodgers and Hammerstein, specifically South Pacific, the movie version. Like we'd go to the video store, which used to be housed in our Walmart when I was little, and I would beg my mom to let me rent that or The King and I over and over again and wash that man right out of your hair, like literally my anthem. I would just pretend that I was washing my hair all the time, walk around, wash that man right out of my hair. It was a great time. When I hit high school age, that was when High School Musical was hitting. So I would say that anyone who is my age probably had that obnoxious thrill of High School Musical. I mean, we did it for one of my high school productions. Like, it was all the rage. And I don't regret it. I don't. It's fun. If I never listen to it again in my life, I won't be upset. But yeah, so.
That's awesome.
How many High School Musicals are there now?
Like 4 or something? I stopped after 1. Like, I was out of that age group by the time like the second and third one came in.
That's so funny. Yeah, that was a whole phenomenon. It kind of still is. Isn't there a new show or something?
Yeah, on Netflix they're doing like a high school that's putting it on. It's like a docu-series or something, but I think it's scripted. I don't know. I haven't watched it.
It's like a scripted mockumentary.
Yeah.
Wow. It just won't die.
Okay, Disney.
Disney doesn't know when to say goodnight.
Correct.
Hunchback of Notre Dame 2.
Not so great.
No.
It doesn't compare.
Terrible. Victor Hugo's like, what now? So mine, it's kind of hard to measure it, but my musical theater obsession goes way back. And I loved Annie, the movie version, but also like I feel like I was born at an ideal time to be obsessed with musicals. Annie and Pirates came out in 80 and 81, I think, and I was born in 78. So like those are just enculturated for me. But then there's also all the Andrew Lloyd Webber stuff that was occurring in the 80s, and then the Muppet Show. So probably my first obsession as far as musicals would go was the Muppet movie. Like I would sing Rainbow Connection in any setting. And I think of it now, and I listen to the lyrics of Rainbow Connection, and I think about like my relationship to that song specifically as an adult, and how it's about following your inner voice, and how great that is, how good a message for kids that is, and how good a message for adults that is. So like, yeah, probably the Muppets. The other thing that was sort of there as a kid was Fame, the TV show, and Fame, the movie. And we talked about this when Eliana was on. She talked about the Glee effect, that when she was younger, Glee was big. So there's a lot of people her age who are into musical theater because of Glee. I don't necessarily think Glee is about musical theater. It's about, yeah, it's about Glee Club and about music more. So I think people coming at musical theater from the Glee lens are missing out a little bit. I had this huge advantage of coming at the musical theater and the arts from the Fame lens. And Fame is gritty, real, and dark, and shows you how hard you have to work, lets you know that people aren't going to be nice to you, that like, and it's not, you're not more virtuous because someone is telling you you're doing something wrong. Like it's an incredible way to look at it generationally. And those are probably my big ones. And of course we couldn't afford the Phantom of the Opera full cast album double CD thing, so we only had the highlights disc that we got from Walmart. So I would obsessively listen to these like jump cut it, because it's through sung, they would like jump cut into a song like
That the only like big like double CD like thing that I like distinctly remember was like was the 1990 whatever 2 or 3 Putting It Together original cast album, which it was like, all right, let's listen to some synthesized Sondheim, take out the to get it open and listen to Julie Andrews and Stephen Collins sing Country House.
oh yeah, everything changed for me when I heard that show. It's a, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. It's hard for me to remember. There's something going on in the background here, so my words are difficult. It was Merrily We Roll Along. Oh, yeah. Merrily We Roll Along was my first Sondheim. And technically Dick Tracy was my first Sondheim, but I didn't know it because I was obsessed with that movie. Saw it 12 times in the theater, would walk to the theater by myself, pay the $4 for the matinee out of my own allowance, and then watch it by myself because no one else would go to it. But I'd sit there and watch it in Jamestown, North Dakota. But I heard Merrily We Roll Along changed my life. And I really turned the corner into a more scholastic appreciation for musical theater. But at that point, I already had a basic knowledge of Rodgers and Hammerstein and Lerner and Loewe and Andrew Lloyd Webber and all the D'Oyly Carte operas, all the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas. So yeah, I think it all happened the right way. Stuff.
What a diversity of experience in this obnoxious theater kid stories. I love it.
It's so true. It's so true. It's so great. And I think no matter how you come to it, no matter what the thing is that unlocks the door for you or like creates those twists and turns in your taste or twists and turns in your understanding of theater and of musicals, no matter what they are, they're right. Like I would not sit down and listen to Phantom of the Opera, but I would definitely watch the Muppet movie.
Always.
Yeah, so never be ashamed of what you're like, what things were the thing that you loved when you were young or the thing that made you love theater. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what road we all take up the mountain. We're all getting there.
I'm not ashamed to admit that I went through a Cats phase.
Yeah.
I thought I was listening to it ironically. I just wouldn't admit to myself that I was enjoying myself.
I've always hated that show. but you know, each his own. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, today's topic, speaking of, we had a ton of adaptations on our delightful lists of hot takes today. So today we're talking about Broadway adaptations. We've given ourselves some fun categories, and we're going to discuss our top fives in these categories. Those categories are like straight up adaptations where the source material's intrinsic pieces are still there, the time period, the characters, all of that. We had the wacky adaptations category where someone adapted something in a crazy way, but somehow it works. And then we had the clever adaptations category. And I know that clever and wacky, those two things kind of sound similar, but there are some shows that in their adaptation are extremely clever, the way that they bring you that original source material. So all three of us have done our top fives in all three categories. And what do you guys want to start with? Top five.
I think straight up is a nice.
I like
Yeah,
it.
let's just work our way down.
All right. So top five, just regular, straight up adaptations. Katie, what's your number five?
Be More Chill,
Ooh.
which is based on a book. If you're unfamiliar with it, Paul can tell you everything about it.
You know, I've never read the book actually.
I've never read the book, so I don't know how close it is to the book, but I do know it's based on a book.
It did take a fair amount of liberties, but yeah, in terms of it is still a straight up adaptation. You're right about that.
What about you, Paul? What's number five for you?
My number five. Sorry, let me pull up my list. My number five is Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Ooh.
From the 80s. I'm sensing a theme here today. A lot of stuff from the 80s for me. Starring Michael Caine and Steve Martin. About if you want to see a more modern interpretation, go see the movie The Hustle, which recently came out, starring Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson, which is a remake. It is a female reboot of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I know the show and the movie pretty well, so seeing that movie in theaters, I knew that it was the same concept. I didn't realize there are places where it's line for line, shot for shot recreation.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm totally on board for it though. It's great.
I just watched it last week. Ryan was busy with something and I was like, I'm going to take myself out to the movies. So I sat on a different chair in my same living room and watched The Hustle. It was so good. I love Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, the original movie and the Broadway show. And I know that there's been a lot of controversy about like the female reboot, but this one works so well. I almost feel like a gigolo character can be more easily or realistically played by a woman than a man. I know that that's odd to say, and it's sort of like a broad generalization, but for someone to use the stereotypes against them as a weapon against other people is very much a thing that is a like victorious story of a marginalized population, not necessarily. Like I felt like those pieces of it really gave it a deeper meaning for me, but you know.
Yeah, it was
I liked it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna retweet. Yes, I agree.
Hashtag Amber's right for once.
Come now.
Now, you guys did not edit me trying to do math for an hour. It took several hours of me just watching.
I kind of just gave up at some point. Like I was writing numbers down, but I was like, I can't do the percentages because my phone is my recording device. So
my music brain was like, make sense out of this. They're numbers. You know numbers.
Only up to 8. That's a music joke, kids. So my number 5, and I realized as I started making my list, and then I gave myself a little bit of limitation. My my number 5 is Mary Poppins.
Ooh.
Yeah, all of my top 5 feature strong female leads. Yeah, I have some honorable mentions here too.
Oh my God, I had like a million honorable mentions.
Yeah, we'll talk about our honorable mentions later. But yeah, Mary Poppins is my number 5. And it's not, when I saw Mary Poppins on Broadway the first time, it was the original cast. I was initially upset by the changes because I missed the film characterization of Mrs. Banks quite a lot. Because they sort of, I felt like they took all of Glynis John's famous characters and like they just switched them. So they made the woman from A Little Night Music into Mrs. Banks. She's like an out of work glamorous actress trying to fit in a social environment. I was like, this is the wrong Glynis John's character.
Right?
Where's Sister Suffragette? So yeah, I initially wasn't a huge fan of the way that it was adapted, but over time, and as I got more familiar with the P.L. Travers material, I truly appreciated what they attempted to do, because Mary Poppins books are impossible to adapt. Impossible to adapt. There's so much. You have a magic compass, you have a magic book, you're going into these things, and they did admirably well adapting them for film, but trying to bring some of that original intention into the Broadway show, I thought that was an admirable attempt. Number 5, Mary Poppins. What's your number 4, Miss Katie?
Fun Home.
Yeah.
Nice.
Also based off of a novel. I just think it's a very important story, especially now. Yeah. And the little child that sings keys gets me every time on the cast recording.
Sydney, what the hell is her last name? I'm blanking, but she was a huge deal in 2015.
She nails it.
She's brilliant. She's just incredible. I can't wait to see what comes next for her as she grows up.
What about you, Paul?
My number 4 is also another David Yazbek musical, but a very different vibe. It's The Band's Visit, which won Best Musical in 2017.
Yes. And that's
Based on
Habibi Kings, right? The Habibi Kings are in that, or involved. Is
the
that right?
Who now?
Habibi Kings, a band.
Oh, yes. Yeah, based off a film and a very true adaptation. It's really, the film is very much one of those like slice of life movies. In the first few seconds of the film, it explains basically exactly what you're going to see for the next 90 minutes, and it says like it's based on true events, and then it says it's not all that. You probably never heard about it. Nothing very interesting happened, or something like that. And they projected those same titles at the beginning of the musical, and it has this sort of like this really interesting like socio-political commentary that like so much could have happened in a terrible way and nothing happened, and that's what's so interesting about it, I think. Anyway, there are a lot of things I could say about The Band's Visit. I think it's amazing. Many people think it's boring. There you go.
There's a lot of things that I think are delightful that people find boring. You know, it is what it is. My number 4 is A Little Night Music. I had some trouble putting this one in a category because I was like, is it a straight up adaptation? Because the location and characters are preserved, obviously, but there's so much about, like, I almost put it in the clever category because of the use of triple meter to like supplement the narrative, and how there's a difference in the stiltedness of a triple meter with some characters, the militaristic nature of some characters being used in triple meter. Like, it felt like there's so much to the way it was adapted that makes it clever that it was hard to place it. but I did put it here in straight up adaptations. Obviously adapted from a film. This one is it's one of my favorite Sondheims, and it is primarily for, like, none of the characters are particularly virtuous. There's not anything where you're like, oh, I'm really rooting for this person to get the thing that they want. Like, there's not really any of that. It's almost soap opera like in the way the stories are told. And yeah, it's a great show. It's beautifully written. The thing that takes it over the edge for me, which also might edge this into the clever category, are there are 4 characters that open the show in the overture, who say very few words but sing the overture. They're called the Liebeslieders, and they are almost a Greek chorus commenting on the action, but they also have characters and characterizations that have their own experiences that comment on the action within the story. It's good. It's a lot. You could write a dissertation on a little night music. Several probably have, but that's my number 4.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes it has his cleverest lyrics. We've already talked about De Maupassant's Candor.
Every week we talk about that lyric. Every week.
You know what? Yeah. Stendhal would ruin the plan of attack, as there isn't much blue in anyway.
The red and the black. Are you kidding me? It's so good.
Also, you mentioned the mixed meter, not mixed meter, but the triplet meters. There is one point in the show where he breaks that rule. Did you know that?
Oh gosh, probably.
Of course, in The Miller's Son. It's a wink and a wiggle and a giggle and a push and I'll trip the light. Fantastic. We go into 4. But
sorry.
For 3 measures.
Yeah.
So it's still 12 beats. He's still preserving that in a way, but also what he's talking about in that moment, Petra, the character who sings it, is talking about how eventually she is going to, accept her role in the world and will, find her place. But for right now, where she is, she doesn't want to be that. She wants to break free from it. So of course she breaks into 4/4, and it's brilliant. Anyway.
But he does that Tchaikovsky thing where you can continue the meter, but you change the emphasis because it's still 12 beats. Yep. Oh, Tchaikovsky. Number 3 on your list. Miss Katie, what's your number 3 straight up adaptation?
James and the Giant Peach.
Ooh, yeah.
Y'all, I love what they did with this adaptation. Like, first of all, I grew up watching was it clay animation that they did it was clay. So I grew up on the movie. But I just think that they've done it brilliantly. Like, the set is pretty just maybe 1 or 2 pieces, depending on if you have Spike and Sponge's house, whatnot. And then you've got the peach. But I love the music. Like, middle of a moment, beautiful. And then Everywhere That You Are literally makes me cry every time.
Oh.
Every time. It's all about, like, dealing with loss and, like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love it. I love it a lot.
Not a fan of Pasek and Paul, and I love James and the Giant Peach. Hot takes. I'm not a fan of Pasek and Paul.
There's so many roles in that show too for, like, everybody. Yeah. Because you've got, like, all the bug creatures, like Ladybug, want to play her so bad. But also, like, Spiker and Sponge, hello. Great times. Joey Harbert and I want to pair up together and do that. Yes. But yeah, I just think it's brilliant. And it's simplistic. I mean, it's not an over-the-top set piece that you need to do the show. So I just think they're brilliant.
I think it's interesting, too, that you bring up Middle of a Moment, because I think in some ways that's sort of a precursor to Waving Through a Window.
I would agree with that.
If you are not familiar with the names Pasek and Paul, you probably have heard of Dear Evan Hansen, this little show that they wrote.
Or that little La La Land thing they did.
Yeah.
You know.
What about you, Paul?
David Yazbek musical. I'm a big fan of David Yazbek. I think he's really, really smart and really talented. And my number 3 is The Full Monty. So if you've been keeping track, all 3 of my straight up adaptations so far have been David Yazbek and not really appropriate for children. So, yeah, I saw the musical before I saw the movie, and I love them both individually. The only change that they made from the movie to the musical was they set it in Buffalo, New York, instead of in somewhere in England, Northern England-ish. But it's a very similar kind of demographics, that blue-collar community. Brilliant show, smart, fun, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I that was another one that I went through a real obsession with when I was like probably a little too young to be listening to it. I would play Pokemon on my Game Boy Color and listen to Full Monty. Like, that was my me time. It was like, I need like a half hour. I'm just gonna listen through the album and play Pokemon.
I would listen to whatever musical I was into at the time and act it out. All the leads were me.
Oh, sure. Well, that too.
Yeah. It was good times. We're on 3, is that right? My number 3 is My Fair Lady.
Talk about a straight up adaptation.
That's another one I was obsessed with as a child.
Yeah. What was the story? Rex Harrison.
Pygmalion.
Yeah,
Oh,
Rex
sorry.
Harrison would Rex Harrison would only do My Fair Lady if it was the play with added music. So he would be going through the script in My Fair Lady and he would say a line, he'd be like, "Oh no, that's not right. Bring me my penguin." Because he had the penguin edition of Pygmalion. So they would bring him the penguin edition of his Pygmalion so that he could look at it and change and modify the lines if necessary, because it had to match the penguin. So Julie Andrews, on her last day of the run, or his last day of the run, brought him a stuffed penguin.
I love it.
Because he was always saying, "Bring me my penguin." Yeah, the things I like about My Fair Lady, the way that when you have something, like, this is what makes it a great adaptation for me. When you have something that is fully formed, full plot, like, and is acclaimed for its brilliance, and you try to add to it, it is difficult, to say the least, to create something that furthers that plot and adds to it. And I think they pulled that off. They were able to do, like, create songs that still moved the plot forward, even though that isn't needed. So they took material where they didn't need to add music in order for it to be compelling, and added music that still furthers the plot. And I think, and it's not just songs about people being in love. It's not just songs about, like, it is like things happen in the songs. And I really, really appreciate that. So that's why it made my list. It's more of a cerebral pick for me. Also, strong female lead. Unless, it just depends on how you play that last moment, but strong female lead. Comments?
A good point to make.
Indeed.
About that last moment. Because yes.
Yep. Yes.
Well, they don't tell you what to do. She just enters. There's no context. You're not told. Just like the last moment of, or the final monologue in Taming of the Shrew. There's also some discussion there. So, what do you do? My favorite version, she dropped the slippers right in the trash and walked out. So,
work. I love it.
She's like,
apparently Julie Andrews was this young, impressive woman.
yes.
She was not yet Julie Andrews.
Nope.
She had not yet done Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella.
She was Julie from the block.
and she auditioned for, I don't know what show R&H were working on at that point.
I thought it was
Early,
Oklahoma.
no.
What was it?
Julie Andrews wasn't right for Oklahoma. What would it have been? I don't know.
But they knew she was wrong. They said she was wrong for it. So,
Well, she auditioned for them, and they were talking, and they said, what are you working on? What's your availability like? And she said, well, Alan J. Lerner has asked me to audition for an adaptation of Pygmalion that he's working on. And I don't think she knew at the time that R&H had already passed on the project. And Hammerstein said to her, if they offer you that, you should take it. But if not, come to our show.
that's awesome.
And
To be Julie Andrews. So that's my number 3. Lots of Julie Andrews in my list. Number 2, Katie.
The Color Purple. Also,
Mm.
just a very important musical. If you've never seen it, you need to do so.
It's on my honorable mentions list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Paul?
My number 2 is also has some strong female leads, but it's really an ensemble show, Ragtime, which is very difficult to discern a one specific lead from it. I mean, it's probably Coal House, but it's hard to say, because if you read the book and or even like see the movie with another brilliant score by Randy Newman, it's not about a person or a particular narrative. It is about the changing world or just after the turn of the century. And I think Aronson Flaherty are one of the best composing teams out there, and they did a brilliant job creating that world. I saw the original production, and it was like stepping into a time machine.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't like about the original production, I saw it on tour, so it wasn't the original cast, but the child actor that started the show, the tone of it was a little discongruous, because it's a little odd to have a child do a direct address. It was almost the Clown at Midnight concept, where like there's some like simple piano music playing, and then a lone child all in white crosses. I was like, what is happening? But also Broadway kids hit their mark and do their job, and sometimes that's a little bit disconcerting too. I was like, who is forcing you to be here, child? But yeah, no, I what? What's my
sorry.
number 2?
I thought you were done.
No, I love your choice. That is all. Love you. Love your choice. Mine is Little Women, the Broadway musical version of Little Women. So this one is kind of a sentimental choice for me, because I directed this show just as like 5 years ago or so. The way we were able to pour ourselves into the narrative of it was really lovely. And the way that the material was supported by the music, the way that they selected what songs could be written, because there's enough poetry in the way that that book is written that you could almost make the entire thing through sung. I feel the same way about Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is one of my honorable mentions here. Same period-ish, very different kinds of narratives there. But I also think that it's super important to have female-driven narrative with large female casts. We don't see that very often in the musical theater. Like, you always see this listings that are like, oh, we're looking for 27 men, 2 women. Like, oh, good. So I think shows like Little Women are important, and the adaptation is beautiful. And when I directed it, I felt that the music and the acting were so strong that I basically asked to have no set. We had a tree and light and a couple of like rolling pieces, like a fireplace or like a tableau for the attic. But for the most part, it was not like a concrete set. There was a parlor set that changed into the hotel lobby because my set designer was very literal. But for the most part, I was trying to like deconstruct those walls and have the costumes and the acting be primary to it. So yeah, no, it's close to my heart. So Little Women is my number 2. All right, here we are.
With that one too, about how to adapt it. I think it's a really difficult task, and
Yeah,
they did a great job.
it's beautiful, and you get a real sense of the deeper inner life of the character. Because if you've ever watched a Little Women movie, the thing I think is missing that you get from the book is that you know the deep insights of the characters you're watching, particularly Jo March, and her inner life is her life. And you get the opportunity to get to know her inner life in the Broadway musical in a way that you don't in a straight narrative. Can you imagine Jo March doing a direct address monologue to camera about what her inner feelings and hopes are? No, but you can picture her I Wish song in 4 or 5 different iterations within Little Women. So like that's where this, when you have a strong inner life in a book or in a movie, I think it is better told through musicals than it is through film. That's why books, adapting books to musicals. Thumbs up for me. What are our number ones where we've arrived at our number 1 straight up adaptations? Miss Katie, what is your number 1?
Once.
Oh.
Guys, it's like one of my favorite all-time musicals forever and ever. I love it so much. I got to see it my senior year of college when I went up for my showcase in New York. I got to see it on Broadway, and it was life-changing. Like, it was so beautiful. The set is simplistic. There's no big dance numbers to detract from the story. Like, the sound of the music is beautifully written. The actors are incredible. It's amazing. You get to like go up on stage like before the show starts, and at intermission they like will literally serve you at the bar that's part of the stage, and then you just go back to your seat. So like you can walk on stage in the middle of the production kind of situation. And I've seen it multiple times on tour at this point, because anytime I have the money and it's coming through, I will definitely do my best to go see it. I just love it that much. What about you, Paul?
My number 1 is Gypsy, based on the memoir of Gypsy Rose Lee, the famous entertainer.
Mine is also Gypsy, Paul. So.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the greatest musicals ever written. When it was originally done, she was still alive, and she came and saw it. I mean, obviously she was consulted on it, but she and June both agreed that the portrayal of the only like liberty that they really took was the portrayal of Mama Rose was too tender, too nice. That the real Mama Rose was just tough as nails and a terrifying force of nature. Not always in a good way, but it was 1959 and it was musical comedy, and they had to make it a little more palatable to the masses. And it was Merman, and it was, and continues to be, brilliant.
Agreed wholeheartedly. This was not the first Sondheim lyrics in history, is it? Is this the first Broadway show with lyrics by Sondheim? No.
My number 1 in every category, I realized, is Sondheim was involved in some way.
Yeah.
But I'll get to my to the other one you're referencing in our next category.
Can't wait. So our next category is clever adaptations. This is where somebody took some source material, changed the place, time, characters, or made a significant change in some way, but made a clever choice about how those things were adapted. So let's see here. Number 5. Oh, I'm going to give quickly my straight up adaptations honorable mentions are Kinky Boots, The Color Purple, Fiddler on the Roof, She Loves Me, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and Waitress.
I am really surprised that Fiddler did not make it onto anybody's list.
I thought about it, and I would have, but I've talked a lot about Fiddler like the past week or so. So I tried to pick things that we haven't really talked about. So yeah.
That's smart. I just went with my favorites. You
I
said top
definitely
5.
could have. No, that's exactly what the assignment was, Paul. You did great.
Thank you, Miss Katie.
You're welcome.
Need validation. What's your number 5 clever adaptation?
So I'm not sure if this actually fits in, but I do think it could. Man of La Mancha.
Absolutely.
Because it's being told as a story, right? Someone's on their deathbed, so they tell the story of Don Quixote. So I thought it was clever.
It is Don Miguel Cervantes in prison because he was imprisoned, and the idea is that it is him putting it on for and with the inmates of the prison.
Got you. See, I've only ever listened to the soundtrack, never seen it on stage. Need to. It's on the list, y'all.
It's a great show.
Yeah, it's not produced very often though anymore.
Mm-mm.
Why is that?
Too many dudes.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Paul?
What's your number 5?
My number 5, speaking of Taming of the Shrew earlier, is Kiss Me Kate, which was just recently revived. It is an adaptation of Shakespeare. 2 of my clever adaptations are from Shakespeare. It is an adaptation of The Taming of the Shrew, but it is told, not only is it told through the lens of a different time period. They set it in the 1930s, or modern times when it was written, but it is also done from the perspective of the company doing the show. It is what is called a backstage musical. It is one of the pioneers of the backstage musical genre, and it was written by Cole Porter, who was a master of if you go back to like the earlier 30s and Kiss Me Kate was in the 40s, not the 30s, early 40s, but still. Cole Porter was a master in the 30s of what was called the interpolated musical, where you'd write some fun, clever songs and you'd string some dialogue through it, and it would be fun and funny, and it was a comedy, and it was light entertainment. And then Oklahoma came along, and people like Cole Porter and Irving Berlin were like, this is what people want now? Okay. And so they had to completely change the way they were writing shows. So Kiss Me Kate and Annie Get Your Gun are just fascinating shows to me for that reason, because it's 2 people who are masters of a completely different art form saying, if this is what the people want, then this is how we have to write musicals now. And really still writing just great shows.
Yeah, I agree. Lily Vanessa / Katerina Minola is the hardest and most fulfilling role I've ever played. Ever. Love it. Would do it today. Probably still could. Yeah. I've got a couple more. I have a couple more Kate years in me. But no, I love that show. Challenging and oddly cerebral but unpretentious.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss. Kiss Me Kate. My number 5 is Carousel. Hot take, I know, because it does not, for a lot of people, it doesn't translate well into the modern era. There are a number of problematic plot points in Carousel, and that's not what this episode is about. The thing that I think makes this a clever adaptation, the original show, the source material, is a play called Lilium. And Lilium is a carnival barker who falls in love with a maid in Budapest, Hungary. So they took this story from Budapest, and it's firmly entrenched in sort of a different way of being. And they placed it into Maine, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. So
they put it in Maine and made it part of kind of a seafaring culture in the U.S. The other ways that they adapted the story, there's a book on Rodgers and Hammerstein, and I don't remember the title of it, but I'll put it in the description for you guys. But it's some of the backstage stories and like production stories of how Rodgers and Hammerstein got produced. And Carousel has got an entire chapter. They talk about the ways that they worked to adapt the source material and stay faithful to the source material that were ultimately unpalatable to the audiences at the time. So in their Boston out of town tryout, they made a lot of changes. The things that are clever to me about Carousel, including that resetting that makes the story palatable for the audience in the US, there's also the way that the new setting affects the characters. So not a lot of people know Lilium very well, the original play. But the salient plot points in Lilium still happen in Carousel. However, the changes are what makes it important. They add to the symbolism of the show. And you wouldn't think that they would need to change to make it better, but they do. But some of the changes from Boston to Broadway, I disagree with, and I will link in the description so you guys can also disagree with me.
I can't wait.
That was number 5. Number 4, Miss Katie.
The Boys from Syracuse.
Wow.
Gotta get some more Shakespeare up in there. Comedy of errors, y'all. But yeah, Rodgers and Hart, right? It's not Hammerstein, it's Hart. Yeah. I just think they were a great pair. All their stuff before Hart went away.
Another great example too of someone changing their course, that Richard Rodgers wrote with Lorenz Hart, and it was very much that interpolated musical, Babes in Arms and Boys from Syracuse, and he was a tunesmith. He wrote very memorable tunes, and Larry Hart said, write me a clever tune and I'll put some very clever lyrics over it, and then we'll string a plot through it. And then Oscar Hammerstein came along and said, why are you writing music? I haven't given you lyrics yet. And suddenly his music shifted, and he still had that beautiful melodic talent, but now it was imbued with the storytelling and the drama from Hammerstein.
Exactly. You put Shakespeare on stage, and especially in musical form, I'm all about it. All about it, which is why Kiss Me Kate is also on my list, so I won't have one somewhere around here. But yeah.
What about you, Paul?
My number 4 is my only off-Broadway show, and it is The Fantastics, the longest running musical in the history of the world. In its original run, it ran for 41 years, I believe. It is an adaptation of, it's a timeless story, but essentially Pyramus and Thisbe. And it is just charming, and you just need a few people, and it's a beautiful little show, beautiful score. It is a perfect example of knowing when to stop writing, I guess, is what I'm saying. Is it doesn't do anything more than, it's just as effective as your biggest, huge musical, but all we need is a piano, a drum set, and a harp to make the sounds that we need, so that's all we're going to use. All we need are 10 actors, so that's all we're going to use, etc., and so forth. Brilliant.
For those of you coming at this from a scholastic perspective, kids, if you've read Midsummer Night's Dream, Pyramus and Thisbe is the play within the play of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
So a little more Shakespeare-y.
Another tiny Shakespeare reference here. My number 4 is Kiss Me Kate. More Shakespeare. So Katie, what's your number 3?
Well, it was Kiss Me Kate. So we've already talked about it a lot. I just really like that. I think it goes down to the whole Tammy the Shrew is one of my favorite pieces of Shakespeare because it is a strong female who is standing up for herself kind of situation, and I think they do a great job in the musical of doing that.
The moment at the end of Kiss Me Kate and at the end of Taming of the Shrew, where she, literally, she has been tamed. So she comes back in and tells everybody, oh no, I put my hand beneath the foot of my husband because that is my way. The wonderful thing that Cole Porter does is he puts a little triangle ding at the end, and it's a tiny little wink. So she says all these things about how she is forever his servant, and that is the duty of the wife. And in front of the whole town, she does all this, and then she turns straight to the audience and goes, "Hey," which is great. That's not written in the Shakespeare, but
we love it. We love it a lot.
I think he intended it. Gosh darn it.
If you need an even modern version, like not even a musical version, just go watch 10 Things I Hate About You. That's another version of Taming of the Shrew. So go help yourselves.
Very, very
live
good.
your life.
I think.
What about you?
Oh, wait.
No, go ahead, Amber. Go ahead. Sorry.
The thing that makes Kiss Me Kate super clever is that it's the adaptation in the modern story is Taming of the Shrew. And they're also performing Taming of the Shrew. Right. So it's an adaptation of Taming of the Shrew where they're doing Taming of the Shrew. It is so meta. It's like the inception of musicals. That's all I'm going to say. Okay.
Yes. The layers, much like ogres and onions. My number 3, I could talk for days about this, and I'm going to try not to. The Wiz. I think it's phenomenal. I love it. Go see the live version that they did, which was really, really brilliant, with a very few exceptions, a few moments that I most part, really, really fantastic. Do not see the movie. I mean, see the movie if you want, but understand that it is very different than the original musical. It is an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, the classic L. Frank Baum story. And it is told through the African-American experience in the 1970s. And it's so brilliantly done. And I have seen a lot of people talk about, not so much anymore, but in the past, people have talked about, well, it doesn't have to be a specifically Black show. I have seen productions of The Wiz with white people and with it's not. It's just not. And again, I could talk for days about what it is that makes the show so much about the Black experience in America, especially in the 1970s. But that's an episode for another day. And The Wiz, brilliant show.
The one thing I love about the movie is the version of Home that Diana Ross sings. I love her interpretation of that song. It's beautiful.
Amber, your number 3?
My number 3 is Hadestown.
Yeah, that was an honorable mention for me.
Yeah.
Same.
So I think the thing that makes it clever is not just that the adaptation is clever, but the concept is clever. And the way the storytelling is disseminated is clever. And, I always love a show where people play their own instruments. So anytime that can happen, I'm in love with that. But yeah, my number 3, Hadestown.
I will never forget the first time I listened to the off or the whatever the original album was before the Broadway album was released. It was from like a concert or something, and it just starts with that trombone blaring, and I was like, "That's it. I love it. It doesn't matter what comes next. I already know that I love this show."
What's your number 2, Katie?
Lion King. Once again, Shakespeare, Hamlet, y'all. But it's so accessible. I've never had the privilege of seeing it on stage. I need to. It's a goal. With that said, I think that the production that they put on stage is amazingly adapted from the Disney movie itself. And then the fact that it tells the story of Hamlet is just double layered. So, what about you, Paul?
My number 2 is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And anyone who's ever done the show gets that. But if you haven't done it or seen it, you don't get why. But The Mystery short story, short story novel, I believe.
Novella, yeah.
Yeah. The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Charles Dickens, a master of weaving stories together and mystery. And unfortunately, he never finished it. And so they handle it brilliantly in the musical. Not just the moment. They get to a point in the middle of a song, and they go, "The point is this, we find out what we be." and everything kind of falls apart, and the musicians start rifling through their paper, and the chairman character, because it's done in the style of the British music hall, comes forward and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we must stop now, for it is at this point that our dear author, Mr. Charles Dickens, laid down his pen forever." But that doesn't mean that we stop the show. There are a bunch of scholarly theories about who done it in this murder mystery, and every night the audience votes on which character is the murderer, and they have to rehearse between all the different elements that the audience votes on and different combinations of things that can happen. There are literally hundreds of combinations of endings for this show, and the actors have to know all of them. It's incredibly well crafted. It's so good. And it was written by the guy who wrote Great Escape, the Pina Colada song. So come on. Amber, you're number 2.
I do like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain. My number 2 is also from a novella. Is it novella or novella?
I've always said novella.
I say novella too, but you said novella earlier, and I was like, it's like a term of endearment for a novel. Little novella. Sorry. Mine is also from a novella. It is Candide.
Ah. It's my brother's favorite musical.
It is. It's my favorite musical overture, for sure. If you want to test how good your rhythm is, try jogging to it. And keeping your steps in meter, because you can do it. It's just real difficult. So Candide, based on Voltaire novella, and the journey of the character is fascinating, and the way that they deal with the way the character travels through the universe in the Broadway show is a delight. So he travels to different countries that all represent different philosophical ideas, and all of that is his journey to try to get to enlightenment, ultimate. It's hard to just Voltaire. But the music's beautifully written. It is, in my mind, it's a clever adaptation because of the way that it was adapted. Again, it's that whole, like, the way that the music attempts to tell the story, the way that the book was put to stage, and the representation of Voltaire within the Candide narrative. It's delightful. It's delightful, and I love it. Candide, number 2.
That's another one that went through major changes during its development. I mean,
Yes.
like, between Broadway runs.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to number 1s, my honorable mentions in the clever adaptations category are The Lippa Wild Party and Billy Elliot.
Okay. I'm a L'Accuse Wild Party guy myself, but...
Oh, well, this has been fun. So...
Nothing wrong with Andrew Lippa. Oh, no.
She gone.
Have disappeared. Well, she back.
Sorry.
Katie, what is your number 1 favorite for adaptation?
It's one I've talked about before. It's I Love You Because, and it's loosely based on Pride and Prejudice. And I've talked about my personal experience seeing it my very first year in college, and just feeling like I was where I was supposed to be in the program that I was supposed to be in. I still listen to it often. I enjoy the music a lot. Good times. Paul, your turn.
Well, my number 1 is my number 1 favorite musical of all time, and I know I've talked about it plenty, so I don't really have to. It's West Side Story. It's the greatest musical ever written. It is based on Romeo and Juliet, updated to be in the Lower West Side of Manhattan in the 1950s.
So my number 1 is also West Side Story. So
because it's perfect.
It's a big Leonard Bernstein list for me. 2 and 1. Master of adaptation, Leonard Bernstein.
Oh, Wonderful Town? Where's Wonderful Town?
Is that adapted?
My Sister Eileen.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, then that's number 1. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Who needs West Side Story when you can have?
Have you ever seen Wonderful Town on stage?
Oh yeah.
It is something else. It is like, it's an anti-story to me. It's so odd. We're not talking about it on this episode, but it is such an odd musical because there are so many. Okay, so in stories in America, the way that we like things to go is that there's a character, they have a dream, they want to have legs so that they can fall in love with Prince Eric and that he'll love her back, and they sing a little song about it, and then the next thing that happens is a villain comes in and says, I'll give you what you want, and then the next thing that happens is the person having some obstacles for the thing that they want, but they're ultimately maybe going to get it, and then a tragedy occurs and they can't have it, and then they overcome that tragedy, and then it's all victorious. In Wonderful Town, the lead character has a big dream, and then in the next bit she has a big dream, and then she has a big dream, then she's a big dream, and then she gets a part-time job.
She also falls in love, and it's sorry. We could talk a lot about Wonderful Town.
It is an unconventional romance, which I really like.
Right, exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yes, I saw it at the Goodman, and there's a lyric that he sings about how something it makes him want to kiss the sky, or something. What is it?
What a way to feel I could kiss the sky. Yeah.
Because of the way that they had done the set design with forced perspective and miniatures, he ran all the way up stage and kissed a cloud.
Brilliant.
I was like, I love this. I quit everything else. This is beautiful.
That song, It's Love.
Yes.
Which is the song he sings when he
it's love.
Right? That exact thing. The first time he meets, not Eileen, the main character's name, what is her name?
Oh my gosh.
The first time he meets her, Donna Murphy, and she says, I want to write for your paper. And he says, go home, go west, go back where you came from. Same exact melody right there. Anyway.
Did you ever leave Ohio? A million kids
Great
just
job.
like you come to town every day with stars in their eyes.
I forgot to mention in my honorable mentions.
Beautiful.
You talked about The Little Mermaid, adapted from the Hans Christian Andersen Little Mermaid Once on This Island. It was so hard not to put that on the list, but it just made the mention for clever adaptations.
Last category, wacky adaptations, crazy choices, anachronisms, things that somehow work. I only have 4 on my list.
Oh.
I struggled with this one a little bit.
Well, I have 5 things. It's just hard. It's hard. This was a tough one. What's your number 5?
Start. Godspell.
Oh.
Right, I thought it fit into the category quite nicely. You got the Bible gospel stories, and they can be set at any time, really. There's no real. I've never done the show, so I don't know what the script says, but I've always seen it done modern. So
I did it 3 times in 2 months. I had always wanted to do the show, and then I did it 3 times in 2 months, and I said, I'll never do Godspell ever again.
You were blessed.
I love it. I did it once set in the Dust Bowl in the 1930s with all acoustic instruments. Very interesting.
I love
in a
that.
shanty town. Yeah.
I did it once in a church in clown makeup.
As is a rite of passage, I feel, for.
Of course.
Why in clown makeup?
I don't know.
That was the original.
Yeah.
Oh. Interesting.
Clown makeup.
I've only seen it one time on the Muni stage, and I was like pre-teen age, so I don't remember everything about it. But yeah. Paul, what about you?
3 of my 5 in this category are Sondheim's, because he loves to take ideas and then twist them and do weird things. So it was very easy for me. And the first one, going back to that theme of not appropriate for children, is Assassins, which is adapting U.S. history, taking all of the people who have ever assassinated or attempted to assassinate a president, and puts them in a outside of space and time, they're all in one place in a carnival shooting gallery, and the presidents are the targets. And it is somehow terrifying and brilliant, and it doesn't lose, like, you just buy into the concept immediately, and it is just one of the most patriotic shows ever, believe it or not.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I love that show. Whole heart love that show. My five, Katie, is also a biblical adaptation. You did New Testament. I'm gonna go way back in the Wayback Machine, and this is Children of Eden.
Oh, I thought you were going to say JCS.
No, JCS is also a really good, clever adaptation or wacky adaptation. It's like placing Jesus Christ into the sort of disco era mentality, hippie commune, end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s tone. Yeah, that's wonderful for wacky adaptation. This is Children of Eden. The thing about Children of Eden that makes it a little bit odd is that they take the archetype of female male and keep it consistent from the story of Adam and Eve all the way through the story of Noah. And they only really give you particular pieces of those stories. And if you've ever read the Bible, there are a lot of gaps in the story of Noah, like in a traditional narrative. There's a lot of gaps in the story of Adam and Eve. Like, we don't know what they had for supper on a Tuesday night, but the places where you naturally had questions as a child, those questions are answered in Children of Eden. They go through and say, well, where do the other people come from for Cain and Abel to marry? They give you those answers. Like, you know what those things are through Children of Eden. So it takes the biblical story, but then also places it in prehistory at a pertinent time and tells the creation and the naming of animals and all of that through this really interesting lens, even though they didn't really change the setting of Earth.
But you know what I think they really did change is that these characters that were written literally just to tell lessons. I mean, they only exist in the Bible.
Hot take.
Pretty two-dimensionally.
Hot take from Paul.
That the Bible has lessons, but that these characters are really two-dimensional in the Bible, and they're really almost just devices to tell these stories and to teach these lessons. And they're human beings in Children of Eden, which that's my favorite thing. Even the character of Father, who, you know, is the deity character, is a very real three-dimensional person. Deity.
Yeah. Well, imagine being the deity and scrapping it, saying, okay, this all was terrible. We're going to keep the part of it that I kind of was good at, and we're going to make a big flood and destroy everything. Imagine having to step back, because God of the early Bible is extremely interactive. Put yourself in the shoes of God stepping back from humanity and being more of a mystery to people, because that is the choice that God makes in the Bible. When you have that thought as a person, you put yourself into those shoes. Not that you can really do that in any kind of realistic way. They wrote a song about that struggle, like what it must have been like for God as a three-dimensional, like feeling, thinking, seeing person to step back and let go of his creation. Yeah, Children of Eden is my number 5. Number 4, Miss Kate.
Okay, let me preface this with, I don't actually like this musical, but I recognize that it is important and that people should experience it. So Cats made the list. We all know that I don't care for Cats except for memory. But I do think that it is well done in the fact of, like, I remember we had the cassette tape of one of, like, 80s performance or whatever when I was little, and it went behind the scenes and it showed the actors, like, studying how cats move, and, like, the dancers really watching how felines move and everything. And so I really thought that was interesting, choreography wise, that they were able to embody those things. So it's not that I don't want to give it its dues. It's just that I don't care to ever watch it. But it is important, and you should take time to watch it, just not the new one. Don't watch the new one. I've heard it's terrible.
Oh, it feels weird to watch something and be like, you ruined something that I already hate. How did you do that?
Fair.
Pulling no punches on cats today. Sorry about that.
But anyway, Paul, what's yours?
My number 4 is a more recent one, and it is Come From Away. I think this fits the wacky adaptation because there really is no story that they're adapting. There was no source material. They created the source material themselves. They interviewed these people. They said, this is a fascinating piece of history that many people don't know about. There was a community here. There have to be stories in it. And they found a million stories and then wove them together beautifully to create something that is, God, the storytelling in that show is just phenomenal. Really beautiful. For those who don't know, on 9/11, many planes were grounded and sent to the nearest airport runway. In the case of some people, that was in Newfoundland in Canada, in a town that was so small that the landing of these planes doubled the population. So, or like more than doubled or something. And how the people came together in that moment of crisis. It's a beautiful show. And I made the mistake of seeing it on September 10th a few years ago. Amber, your number 4?
My number 4 is Pippin.
Yay.
Just trying to represent Molly because she's not here. Pippin is the story of Pippin, son of Charlemagne, and again, his Candide-like quest to find ultimate fulfillment. Again, deeply rooted in philosophy and deeply rooted in the journey. And the thing that they do to make this sort of a wacky adaptation is that it is presented through the lens of a troubadour who gets his troupe of circus performers to support and tell the story of Pippin. Though Pippin himself is not part of the troupe. He is enticed into the troupe by this sort of 3-ring circus master of ceremonies character, who I think in my mind is actually the devil. So my 1 and 2, my 5 and 4 choices, yes, I said it, are heavily feature God and the devil.
I always thought of the of the leading player to be Pippin's ego.
Oh, I like that too.
And that Catherine, in some ways, represents the id.
Id, yeah.
Forces.
I like that.
Number 3, what are we up to?
Yeah, number 3, Katie.
Okay, this is where we get off Broadway stuff. 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
I think the concept behind, I mean, it's very much like Sunday in the Park with George in the way that it takes the photos and they created music based on the photos, right? I'm not misunderstanding. But it's more modern sounding music. So if you like newer stuff, check it out. It's a good time.
Oh yeah. If you like more modern sounding stuff, Ryan Scott Oliver is where it is at.
Yeah. Yep. Pong?
Funny you should mention Sunday in the Park with George, because that's my number 3, which, you know, there's some contention around it. Is it an adaptation? Is it original? It is based on a painting. A lot of the characters are people in the painting, but they're completely made up characters. It also follows the life of Georges Seurat, who was a painter and did do a lot of the things in the show, but then they heavily fictionalized it. So I counted it as an adaptation, but it's a lot of invention was needed to create it, and I give great kudos to.
You're muted, Amber.
I know, I'm back. I have a tie for number 3 for me. my first number 3 is Rocky Horror, which is
Wait.
an adaptation of Frankenstein.
Okay. Yes.
It is.
I've never thought of it as being such, and you are absolutely right.
Yeah, Dr. Frankenfurter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And?
So Rocky Horror is my number 3, and tied with 6. And the reason that they're tied, Rocky Horror is sort of presented as I don't even know, like B horror movie, cult, vampire, alien, Frankenstein with fishnets. They're going to put that on the poster now. And 6 is an adaptation of the true stories of the 6 wives of Henry VIII, but set as a girl group, and again put into a different genre completely than the original source material. So these two kind of tied because they kind of both hit that sweet spot. They're a modern retelling of something that is being highly stylized and put into a different, like to make you think a different way about the source material. So that's my number 3. It's a tie.
And fishnets.
And fishnets, that's the through line.
Both.
There you go. Number 2, Katie.
Well, actually, you just said my number 2, which was 6. Yeah, I just think that concept is really great. So, and the music's, what's it the kids say nowadays? Slapping? Is that what they say? It slaps? I don't know.
You are the youngest person on this call, Katie Barnes.
Yeah, and I don't even know. Isn't that so worrisome?
That's gross. Why would
Isn't it? Does that not sound weird?
Well, I think it works. Like, oh man, that slaps. That song slaps. Like it just like, I don't know. I think it.
I just go with, they're awesome. They're cool. I like them.
So there you go, fellow teenagers. I understand you. Don't worry. You're represented.
Paul is you. All right, Paul.
And with that, I am going to talk about a Harlem Renaissance jazz you know, what the kids are listening to. Speaking of music that slaps, my number 2 is Ain't Misbehavin'. I love this show. It is what I would consider the first jukebox musical, although it's truly a review, but it is a review that did something differently in that it really created a world that you were stepping into. It wasn't just like, here we are and here are these songs. It said, like, we're going to enter the Harlem Renaissance. We're going to have these performers really recreate the style so masterfully. And that cast, oh my God, that original cast, not just perfection. And then on top of that, Richard Maltby Jr., who directed it, also, you know, helped shape these arrangements that they created it more like a score than just a collection of songs. I just love that show, and it's incredible. And you have to have an entire company, the band, the actors, everybody has to be at the top of their game to really do it right.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great show. That's a great pick. But first, jukebox musical. You don't think that like 45 minutes from Broadway?
No, because I wouldn't call that a jukebox musical. I'd call that a review. Like,
but it
took the form of review and was like, but let's treat it like it is a musical, which is, I think, sort of a precursor to.
But 45 Minutes from Broadway does have a plot, and they loosely strung that plot together around the George M. Cohan songs. And he did it himself based on his own hit songs. But again, maybe any George M. Cohan musical could be a jukebox musical because he always used the same songs.
Right. Well, this is a conversation for
it's an entire episode on George M. Cohan, on the pulse of the teenage musical theater culture. Oh my goodness. My number 2, right, is Rent.
Mm-hmm.
An adaptation of La Boheme set in 1989 into 1990 in New York during a time of great upheaval in the housing market and the real peak of the AIDS crisis. There was public health and public housing crisis happening in New York at the time. And the show came out in 96. Is that right? So it had been in development since 88. I think he had started writing it in 88. So it was set in a very concrete year at a very concrete time. But Rent takes some of the things from La Boheme and places them into the modern era in such an interesting way that it had to be my number 2 pick.
Yeah, I love shows that can really see those historical parallels and just really cash in on it so well.
Because it was the cholera epidemic, right?
I thought it was TB. I could be wrong.
Tuberculosis. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, one of those.
Katie, number 1 wacky adaptation.
Okay, guys, go with me because this is definitely far from Broadway, but it's still amazing. A Harry Potter musical. Now get me. I know it's a parody. I get it. But also brilliantly done. It's amazing. If you haven't ever seen it, go to starkidsproduction.com or whatever. You can watch it for free. It's brilliant. Or find it on YouTube. It's brilliant. And then go see some of their other productions, which they have a lot of. But yeah, Harry Potter musical, y'all. Paul?
I love it. Number 1, Paul. What is it?
My number 1, Into the Woods. Adapted from the stories by the Brothers Grimm, and then interwoven beautifully. Again, another Sondheim-Lapine collaboration. It's incredible in so many ways, and you can go see it at the Barnes at Napanee very soon. It'll be opening.
Starring Molly.
Starring Molly.
Who isn't here because she's rehearsing.
And we miss her so much.
We do. Oh, I would want to know what her top 5s are.
I was very interested. I didn't put Pippin in my clever adaptation because I was like, oh, Molly will say that. I completely forgot.
She will.
Single tear. Amber.
My number 1 wacky adaptation, crazy choices, is Chorus Line.
Very nice.
Yeah, Chorus Line, the development of this show, it started with, I think they said like a case of beer and a couple bottles of wine and a tape recorder. And they got a bunch of dancers together to hear their contemporary stories of what they were going through to get to Broadway, some of whom had been on Broadway, some of whom had been off Broadway, but career dancers and what they went through to get to where they are and to continue to succeed. The reason I think that it falls into that wacky adaptation category is that it's not based on literary source material, and the development of it was on purpose. They wanted to know the story of a particular community of individuals, so they sought it out and recorded it. And if you listen to any of the original tape recordings, if you can actually hear them, some of the things that they say are directly put into lyrics. So some of the choices in the show where you think, oh, I wonder why they picked that specific thing. It's because that is the specific thing that the dancer had said in their development meetings of it. So yeah, my number 1 wacky adaptation, the second longest running show for a very long time, is Chorus Line. It's been passed by somebody now. What's our longest running Broadway musical?
Well, Phantom.
Phantom, that's right.
But for a while it was Fiddler, then Chorus Line replaced Fiddler, then Dolly didn't replace Fiddler. Chorus Line replaced Fiddler. I don't know. Chorus Line is still technically, B.B. Newirth says, Chorus Line is the only musical in the longest running musicals category that is actually a Broadway musical. All the others are British imports. Yeah. So we're talking about longest Broadway musical, not the longest Broadway run of a musical.
Yeah. Did you know that there is like the longest running actor in Broadway history is one member of the cast of Cats who opened and closed it?
I have her autograph.
You do not.
I do.
Like, that's the person I always wanted to be when I was growing up. That's the person I wanted to be as a Broadway person. If I was going to be someone on Broadway, I would want to still be able to buy my groceries. But like every night I go do Cats. And maybe not cats, but
It is
you know.
athletic.
Yeah, I can, that's as close as we're getting to cats. Well, those are our top 5s in the adaptations category. This has been episode 15. I know that we have not really chatted about what we want to do for episode 16, but we'll come up with.
If I can really quickly, I know we've been going for a while and we've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
I want to say to our thousands of viewers, we talked a lot about adaptations. It sounds like an 80s, like after your Saturday morning cartoons PSA. We talked a lot about adaptations today, and that's great. But people talk about adaptations sometimes as a bad thing. It's a dirty word in a lot of ways. I want more original musicals on Broadway. But as we just proved, there were a lot of amazing musicals in the history of Broadway that were adapted. A lot of groundbreaking musicals were adaptations. I'm surprised we didn't even talk about Hamilton. That was adapted. But Chorus Line was adapted. Oklahoma was adapted. Technically, Company was adapted, but that's debatable. Things that changed the face of theater were adaptations. So I bet a lot of your favorite musicals were from previous sources. Adaptation does not inherently mean Quamina and Starlight Express were both original musicals. So things to think about. There are good original musicals, there are bad original musicals, there are good adaptations, there are bad adaptations. Neither is inherently better than the other. Please stop saying that they are. Off of my soapbox.
Well, on that note,
I had to get it in, I'm sorry.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 15 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. This has been a doozy. I'm loving the top 5s. Maybe we'll think of some fun top 5s for the some fun top 5s for next week. Who knows? And maybe we can coax Miss Molly into joining us. I don't know. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. Everybody's favorite Miss Molly will return.
We'll get to hear more about Pippin.
What?
We'll get to hear more about Pippin and Fosse.
Yes, the dog and the choreographer. So thank you for joining us today. As always, thank you, Goshen New Kiwanis, for your support of Goshen Theater Drama Club. We could not do it without you. Thank you also to Paul Regano and Katie Barnes for joining me today for Drama Club Table Talks. You guys are great. Paul, I know you're not a regular panelist here, but it would be really great if you could join us next week for episode 16. What do you think?
Oh no, I have an orthodontist appointment next week.
Oh, okay. Well,
Change it now.
You know
Sorry.
how long? This is an exclusive orthodontist that I go to. This doesn't just happen. I'll make it.
Is it Steve Martin on a motorcycle?
Yes.
I be an orthodontist.
He's upgraded.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to take that as a yes from Paul. And so we'll see you guys next week for episode 16. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.